What's up guys, D-Rock1992 here. For this next video and for my next About video, I'm going to be talking about a band that is widely regarded as one of the best rock and roll bands of all time. These guys are really popular. They've been around in the business in the music business since the 70s, and they're still relevant today. In fact, they are going on a world tour this summer, I believe, very soon. Anyway, if they're not already on it. The band I'm talking about, AC/DC. They have made a living in their band. Their band is AC/DC's made a big living playing the same song over and over again, pretty much. They have a formula that's worked for them over the years. Just straight up rock and roll, damnation, a play on one of their songs. But yeah, it's straight rock and roll. You know what you're gonna get from AC/DC, and it's a formula that works. And a lot of bands are criticized for playing the same thing, for playing the same music. But the thing is, with AC/DC, it works for them. They've had unbelievable success. They've sold way over 100 million. Actually, they've sold over 200 million albums, I believe. They're one of the best-selling bands of all time. And without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. So the band started out all the way back in 1973. So they've been a band for a long time. They've never broken up at all. But they started out with Angus Young, who is the lead guitarist. They started out with... Actually, they had a lot of band change early on in their career. But the lineup that first got the most recognition was Angus Young on lead guitar, Phil Rudd on drums. Phil Rudd joined the band a couple years later in 1975. Angus Young in 1973, he was with the band. He's been with the band his entire career, and he is, right now, the only guy in AC/DC that's been with the band the entire time. More on that later, but Angus Young on lead guitar, Phil Rudd on drums, underrated. Cliff Williams on bass guitar. Cliff Williams joined the band in 1977. Malcolm Young, who started with the band in 1973. And then, of course, Bon Scott on lead vocals. He joined in 1974. A side note, before Cliff Williams, actually, a guy named Dave Evans was the lead vocalist for the first 2 years of AC/DC's career. Not a lot of people may know this except diehard AC/DC fans, but I don't think they released an album with Evans. Bon Scott took over in 1974, and obviously Bon Scott's one of the greatest vocalists of all time, honestly. They had a guy named Mark Evans on bass guitar in 1975, but he was only with the band for a couple years until Cliff Williams joined. So, in AC/DC's Bon Scott years, your heyday, your band was Angus and Malcolm Young, Phil Rudd, Cliff Williams, and Bon Scott. That being said, they had a couple of... Starting out, they had a couple of releases only in Australia. I'm not going to get into those because actually a lot of the songs that were on the Australia releases came on their international studio album debut. A lot of those singles were on that. 1976, their international debut, High Voltage, was released. High Voltage eventually went triple platinum in the US. Right now it is triple platinum. and it only charted at 146. But it kind of showed people that AC/DC was around, was sticking around, you know? Was a band kind of to be reckoned with. Some songs off of it, of course. If it's A Long Way to the Top, If You Want to Rock and Roll, a very popular AC/DC track. The Jack is a favorite of mine. The Jack is a really good song. Live Wire is a good song. Rock and Roll Singer. TNT, one of their most popular tracks. High Voltage is a popular track. She's Got Balls. It's just a really good start to AC/DC's career, and they got some fans in America, definitely, with this album. The same year, they came out with Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. And that one was a big success, and it really got AC/DC noticed. High Voltage kind of began their American career, but Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap really got them noticed. This album went to number 3 on the Billboard 200, and it went 6 times platinum. This album is is one of their most famous albums. The title track is one of their most known songs. Love at First Feel and Ride On are two of their 4 singles. 2 more of their 4 singles. The title track and Jailbreak, which is a pretty good song as well. Problem Child is a good one. And then one of their more popular tracks as well, at least I think it is, Big Balls, which is a very interesting song if you've ever listened to it. So Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap really got them noticed. Big time. They went a little bit of a step back with their next couple of albums. Let There Be Rock came out in 1977. And it went double platinum, but it only went 154 on the Billboard 200. Still, however, there are some pretty good songs on it. 3 singles, Dog Eat Dog, Let There Be Rock, and Whole Lotta Rosie. Whole Lotta Rosie and Let There Be Rock are 2 of them I definitely know. They have a song on this album called Crapsody in Blue. So you can kind of tell that this band is not like an easy listening band or anything like that. They definitely aren't. So, Let There Be Rock, definitely another one out there. The 3rd album, internationally released by AC/DC. Their 4th album, Powerage, came out in 1978. It only went platinum, and it went 133 on the Billboard 200. So another, at the time, underwhelming album, definitely. They only released 1 single, which actually is popular in the Bon Scott era. Rock and Roll Damnation is a very good song. Riff Raff is a good song. Sin City, I believe I've listened to. So, Powerage was a moderately successful album. But their breakthrough came in 1979 with Highway to Hell. It is considered one of the best AC/DC albums. One of the better hard rock albums of all time. It went to number 17 on the Billboard 200, and it went 7 times platinum. It really was a big success. The title track is one of the most popular AC/DC songs of all time. Girls Got Rhythm is it's a popular AC/DC track. Touch Too Much is another single off the album. Get It Hot is a very good song. Shot Down in Flames, I believe I've heard of before. So, Highway to Hell definitely was the breakout album for AC/DC. And at the time, it really looked like the AC/DC was gonna... it really looked like they were gonna ride high. Unfortunately, though, everybody knows this. If you're an AC/DC fan, even if you're not, you know this. Bon Scott unfortunately passed away in 1980. So the future of the band was very much in doubt when he passed away. But the very next album, 1980, they found a guy named Brian Johnson. A guy who was also Australian, and AC/DC is an Australian band. Brian Johnson, you know, he was a bandmate of a band called Geordie. Geordie, I think it's spelled. And still, you weren't sure how he was going to take over, how everybody was going to react after Bon Scott's death. An untimely passing, unfortunately. But Back in Black came out about 5 months later after Bon Scott passed away. And you know the rest. Back in Black is probably AC/DC's best album ever. It was a huge success. It was the perfect comeback. I mean, it was a little mini comeback because they only had a 5-month difference between... They only had a year difference between Highway to Hell and Back in Black, but Back in Black is just a legendary album. It's a diamond album. 22 times platinum. That's phenomenal for any album. It is one of the best-selling albums in American history, in U.S. history. It hit number 4 on the Billboard 200. It has every single track on that album is an AC/DC favorite. 4 tracks came off it that were singles. You Shook Me All Night Long, which is probably the signature hit for the band, one of the signature hits. Hell's Bells, very popular AC/DC track. Back in Black, which is actually personally my favorite AC/DC song. And Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, which is also a very good AC/DC track. What Do You Do for Money, Honey is a good song. Giving the Dog a Bone, very good. Let Me Put My Love Into You. Have a Drink on Me, and Shake a Leg are the other 5 off that album. You know. Oh, Shoot to Thrill as well. Shoot to Thrill, a very good AC/DC song. So all 10 tracks off that album were huge, huge successes for the band. There's no doubt about it. And it proved that they weren't done yet. That they weren't finished just because Bon Scott passed away. So then the question was for AC/DC, how do you follow up such a phenomenal success in Back in Black? Well, you follow it up. Well, AC/DC followed it up with their first ever #1 album. For Those About to Rock, We Salute You came out in 1981. It was not nearly the success as Back in Black, but it didn't need to be. Because that album was, Back in Black was just a phenomenal, humongous success. But their next album didn't really have to be. So, in terms of standing on the Billboard 200, like I said, it was their #1 album, their first ever #1 album. It went quadruple platinum. And, I mean, another big success for AC/DC. You know, 2 singles off the album, Let's Get It Up, which is a good song. And For Those About to Rock, We Salute You is another, the title track is a very well-known AC/DC song. Some other ones on here, I mean, a couple other ones here. Put the Finger on You, Inject the Venom, several songs like that. But again, this album was a very nice follow-up to Back in Black. A couple of years later, in 1983, Flick of the Switch came out. And in terms of... You had 3 albums back-to-back, Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, that were giant successes. Especially Back in Black. Their next couple offerings were pretty lackluster compared to the other offerings compared to the greatness of those 3 previous albums. Flick of the Switch only went platinum, and it went number 15 on the Billboard 200. They got themselves a new drummer on this album. I believe they... No, they... Oh, I guess they didn't. But 3 singles came off of Flick of the Switch: Guns for Hire, Flick of the Switch, and Nervous Shakedown. You know, not a ton of memorable AC/DC tracks off this album. And you can almost consider it a bit of a bump in the road for them. The next album came out a couple of years later in 1985, Fly on the Wall. It went all the way down to number 32 on the Billboard 200, and it also was a platinum album. And I believe on this album, there was a change in the band. Phil Rudd actually left the band because the drummer for AC/DC, he left the band because of disagreements. Simon Wright came in to fill in. And he was with the band for the rest of the 80s, I believe. So Simon Wright had a little bit of a tenure in AC/DC. 3 singles off of Fly on the Wall: Danger, Sink the Pink, and Shake Your Foundations. A few of these songs are pretty moderate AC/DC hits. This one also, actually, the next album they released in 1986 wasn't a AC/DC studio album, but it was a soundtrack album to a Stephen King movie called Maximum Overdrive, and this was the soundtrack album Who Made Who. Who Made Who is actually a pretty decently well-known AC/DC track. Who Made Who, the only single off the album. Most of the songs off this album are previous AC/DC hits. You Shook Me All Night Long is on this. Sink the Pink, Hell's Bells, For Those About to Rock. Couple new ones. A couple instrumentals called DT and Chase the Ace. Besides Who Made Who, they were the only songs that were newer songs off the album. Excuse me. Then, 3 years later, they come out with Blow Up Your Video, which is their next studio offering. It also was a little bit lackluster. Excuse me, it went platinum in the US, and it hit number 12, so it went up a little bit on the Billboard 200, but Blow Up Your Video may be another lackluster album. That's the Way I Wanna Rock and Roll and Heat Seeker are the only 2 singles that were released off this album. Mean Streak is a popular song, is a song off that album. Rough Stuff. So again, another kind of underwhelming album. Despite, I mean, the fact is that the 3 albums I just talked about weren't big giant successes like the 3 previous albums. Not nearly as much. Not even close. They still were very popular in the US as a touring act. Definitely, they went on tour a lot, and they were very popular, a very popular live band. But the next album after Blow Up Your Video brought them back. It told everybody that AC/DC was back, and they were there to stay. The Razor's Edge came out in 1990. It went all the way to number 2 on the Billboard 200, and it went 5 times platinum. It recaptured the giant success of Highway to Hell, Back in Black, and For Those About to Rock. 2 great singles off this. Thunderstruck is one of their most well-known tracks, one of their well-known new tracks off the album. Thunderstruck, Money Talks, and Are You Ready are the 3 singles released off this album. Fire Your Guns is a good song from them. Got You by the Balls is a very good song. Just a big comeback for AC/DC. And they had a new drummer. Chris Slade actually came in for the band. And he was with the band for a little while anyway. Then you had to wait another 5 years for another AC/DC album, but Ballbreaker came out in 1995, and it was as much of a success as The Razor's Edge. Hit number 4 on the Billboard 200 and went double platinum. Few singles released off this album: Hard as a Rock, Hail Caesar, and Cover You in Oil, which I believe I've heard all of them. Hail Caesar's a good track. And I believe Hard as a Rock, too. Caught With Your Pants Down is a good AC/DC track. Definitely another success for them as they got into the 90s. So already you see AC/DC being very successful in the 70s, the 80s, and then the 90s. So the big question would be, how would they fare in the 2000s? Answer: they fared pretty damn good. Stiff Upper Lip came out in 2000. And it hit number 7 on the Billboard 200, and it went platinum, so it was a pretty decent success for AC/DC. Stiff Upper Lip, Safe in New York City, and Satellite Blues were the 3 singles off the album. Can't Stop Rock and Roll is a good one. Come and Get It is a good song, I believe, off this album. So, definitely another success for AC/DC, and Phil Rudd rejoins the band. He's had 2 stints in AC/DC, and so Phil Rudd back with the band. And then you had to wait a number of years for the next studio album. But it was a worthwhile wait, because in 2008 we got Black Ice. And it is one of the biggest successes by AC/DC in their career. It is only their 2nd album. Thus far, they've had only 2 albums that have went to number 1. For Those About to Rock, as I mentioned, and Black Ice. Black Ice went double platinum, and it sold very well. But Black Ice just proving that AC/DC can still do it can still do it today, can still rock out today as they did in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. 4 singles, all good singles off Black Ice: Rock and Roll Train, Big Jack, Anything Goes, and Money Made. It's a big album, too. 15 singles, 15 tracks off the album. Black Ice, the title track, a good song. War Machine, a great song. Skies on Fire. And just unbelievable album. I mean, another huge success for AC/DC. And then lately, they released a new album. Rock or Bust actually just came out last year in November. And Rock or Bust has done pretty well. I mean, number 3 on the Billboard 200, and thus far it is a gold album. Probably will get to platinum at some point. But Rock or Bust was a little bit of a different period in actually a big change in the band with this album. Malcolm Young unfortunately got sick. I believe he has dementia, and he unfortunately had to leave the band because of early stages of dementia. But you still had Brian Johnson, Angus Young, a new addition to the band, and Stevie Young, who had actually, I saw, was with the band in 1988. Cliff Williams, still with the band. And another controversy, with the band, Phil Rudd actually got convicted of murder. Actually, he's been accused of murder in Australia, I believe it was. So the band's going through a lot of controversy with him. But, despite all that, they still put out a very good album. Uh, there were 3 singles released. Play Ball, which is a good AC/DC song. Play Ball and Rock or Bust are the 2 I've heard on the new album. The only 2 I've heard of. And then they just recently, in this month, released a single, Rock the Blues Away. So definitely, it's a short album, for sure. 11 tracks, and the highest track is the highest track in terms of minutes is the 3 minutes and 41 seconds. So a very short album, but still proving that they can do it. And that's pretty much it for their career. I mean, like I said at the beginning, they are actually going out on a world tour this year. Starting in the summer, something like that, they are going to be going on a world tour. And their world tour is actually going to take them to Montreal, Canada. And I really want to go to this concert. August 31st, they're going to Montreal, Canada. And I've been begging to go, definitely. It's going to be expensive because of the band AC/DC is. But I really hope I can go to this concert. It would be one of the highlights of my life, definitely. The town I live in has bands that come in and they perform at our fair, but I haven't been to any other concerts outside of my town. So I would love to make my first concert outside of the town be a band like AC/DC, who they are my favorite band, and I'll say it right now, they'll probably be an honorable mention in my top 10. I'll have some honorable mentions, but they'll probably be in honorable mentions. They're not my favorite, but they're a darn good band. And I have a lot of their songs on my iPod. So, saying all of this, the album, maybe they'll be coming out with another studio album at some point. It'll probably be a few years. They'll have their tour, and they'll have to decide if they want to go on making studio stuff without Malcolm Young, one of their original founders. One of the original founders of the band. But for AC/DC fans, it's not going to be the same without Malcolm Young in the band for their world tour. But give them credit. They have gone through a lot of obstacles in their career, and they've come through them with flying colors. They really are one of the better comeback bands in rock and roll history. There's no doubt about it. So that is it for my video on AC/DC. D-Rock 1992 out.